I would say that you have a choice. You always have a choice. In that moment, I did not think I had a choice, but it was because I was only looking at it from one perspective. And when we get to that point where we're so deep down like that, we cannot see the other perspectives. We can only see the one that we see at the time. But I want you to know that there are other perspectives out there. There are other options. You always have a choice. And so I encourage you to try to figure out what your choices are, what your options are, because you can choose something else. You don't have to choose the only one way. There are other ways, there are other options that you can choose. You just have to be willing to open yourself up to seeing them from a different perspective. And that may be putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Like I had to put myself in my husband's shoes and say, okay, this is the way he sees me. This is the way he sees this situation. Let me see if I can look at it from that perspective. And that will open up a whole new window, a whole new door for you to see things from a different light and in a different way. And it could lead you down a path that, like me, I ended up speaking on stage in front of 2,000 people, sharing my story in front of 2,000 people, simply from a conversation that just started with, I have to take a nap every day because I can only hold my head up for a few hours at a time. And so you just really never know where it can go when you open yourself up to the possibility that maybe there is a different choice. Maybe there is another option here.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have someone here who's going to inspire you. You're just going to have a great time listening to this guest. And her podcast is out there in the world. She's got a book that's coming out in April. And she's just a great person to talk to. So you're going to enjoy this conversation. Amy's here on the podcast. Amy, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, Dave. I'm excited to chat with you, get to know all of your listeners.
It's great. It's great. I always try to start with this with all my guests because people are listening from around the world. And there's people listening in your part of the world who would love to go, wait a minute, that's where I live. Tell everybody where you are, Amy, in this big world of ours.
I am in the United States, right? Kind of in the middle, the southern middle portion of the United States.
Beautiful. Awesome. And we have, again, listeners around the world who come and listen to the show, and they're always looking for their next great book. You have a new book coming out. Can you tell us the name of your new book?
Absolutely. It's called Finding My Hero Within, A Journey from Incapacitation to Empowerment.
Wow. We have a lot to unpack in our conversation today. It's amazing. And we had a chance to chat already. So I have a sneak peek to our conversation today, but I'm excited to have you on the show. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
So we mentioned you also have a podcast as well. Can you tell everybody about your show?
Absolutely. It's the Polish the Mirror podcast. And I feature people who have found hope in the midst of adversity. I am all about helping people tell their stories, and because it's a reflection of my life, which we'll talk about here in a bit, but I have found hope in the midst of adversity, and I love helping other people be able to share their stories of finding hope in the midst of adversity too. So Polish the Mirror is the name of the podcast. It's on all of the platforms.
Good. Where is a good place to start listening to your show? Should we listen to the most recent episode, go back to the first? Where would be a good starting point for a new listener for your podcast?
That is such a great question, because the very first episode is where I share my story. I talk about why I started the podcast, what my story is, and what sparked the idea for the podcast and what the purpose is. So I would suggest going all the way down to the very first episode and starting with my story. Then it will help to understand the rest of the stories.
Amazing. So now let's jump into your story here on the podcast. See, that good segue, right?
That's great.
Let's do this. Let's talk about this. When I heard you talk about your story when we met, I just kind of walked away from this and going, I don't know if I would have it in me to do what you have done and what you've lived through. I question my own mental fortitude and ability to move through life with the challenges that you faced, and you do it with such grace. There's something about you as a person that's inspiring, and I'm sure your community just loves being a part of what you do. And now we get the joy of having you here. So
Aw,
can you
thank
tell
you
us a
so
little bit?
much.
I know. Well, tell us about your story. Like, go back in time, pre-writing the book and all of that. Something really amazing happened in your life where your life took a big turn. Can you kind of take us back to
Yeah,
that moment and share that? Because I'd love to start there.
yeah, absolutely. It has been quite a journey, that's for sure. In 2014, I was working at a major university. I have 3 kids, and I was doing all the things moms do, run them everywhere, doing, the mom thing, volunteering, all of that. So pretty much I felt like I was doing everything for everyone. And literally the very next day, I couldn't even take care of myself. And so I felt sick during the night. And I got up to take some medicine, and I ended up passing out, and I landed on my face on the hardwood floor. And the impact of that sheared my brainstem, caused a traumatic brain injury, and it actually broke my neck. But it was 6 months before anyone figured out my neck was broken. And so I was just living life with a broken neck. But for nearly a year after that accident, I had to lay flat in a bed for 23 hours a day. I couldn't walk. I couldn't talk. It's emotional for me. I appreciate your understanding as the emotions surface.
Yeah.
So I couldn't walk. I couldn't talk. I couldn't hear or see correctly. And I couldn't speak above a whisper. I completely missed that entire year of my kids' lives. And so my daughter was a senior in high school. My son was a freshman in high school. And my little guy was,
Yeah.
he was 4 years old. And I completely missed an entire year of their lives. And I have always been a very independent person. I love doing things for myself. I don't like to have to depend on anyone. So to go from doing everything for everyone to not even being able to take myself to the restroom was like a form of torture for me. And so I feel like such a burden to my family because they were having to do everything for me. I literally could not lift my head off of the bed. And so as you can imagine, I went into this deep, deep, dark place that I would never, ever wish on anyone. I'm a former educator and social worker, and I was the one, when people would have thoughts and talk about doing things, they would call me in and I would talk them down or get them help. Well, I became the patient. I became that person. I knew I had to do something about it. I wanted to stop the pain for myself and for my family. I did not want them to have to continue living like this, to take care of me like this. And so I devised a plan, and I knew that I had enough pain medication to make it happen. And so I had this plan that I was going to solve this problem. And I began to pray, and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed that I would die because I wasn't living. I was just merely existing. But I was still alive. I was not dying. And so I was going to take matters into my own hands. And so I had this plan. I fully intended to carry it out. And if you have ever dealt with depression or sadness or been in a deep, dark place like that, you will understand that you don't think clearly. Like your thoughts are just mucky and murky, and they're just not clear. And the only way I know how to explain what happened was I just had this moment of clarity where the thinking was so clear. And my thought was, what if I don't have to die? What if I can use the same energy I'm using so hard trying to die, and I turn it around and use it to fight to live instead? Maybe I can get better. And if I can get better, maybe I can use my experience to help other people. And the curiosity of that, like, I have a choice here. Like, I didn't feel like I had a choice in that moment. I thought, this is what has to happen. Just that curiosity of, wait, I have a choice, was enough to help me press pause on that plan. And I fought with it. I wrestled with it. And I decided that I was going to take my energy and use it to fight to live, with the intention of using my story to help other people. And that's what I did. Like, in that moment when I made that decision, okay, I'm going to fight to live now, but I'm going to do it because if I get better, I'm going to use my story to help other people. And that has been my intention. That was 10 years ago. That has been my intention the whole time. Like, if I can get better, I'm going to use this to help other people. And that's exactly what I get to do now. I get to use my story to help other people. I now live an empowered life. There's so much more to it. Obviously, that's is about. It's my 10-year journey of fighting my way through this, of, not knowing I had a broken neck and figuring out I had a broken neck and all of the other things that I had to go through. But yeah, now I get to use my story to help other people. And I really feel like, I was touching lives as an educator and a social worker, but not nearly in the way that I'm able to help people now. And so I see what I've been through as a gift. I really do. I see it now as a gift because I'm able to use it to help other people. And that's my whole purpose.
Okay, from your kid's perspective, especially for a 4-year-old, we go to bed one night, we say goodnight to mom and go tuck in our bed, and we get up the next morning and life is completely different. Like, what kind of questions did your kids have through all of this? Like, I can't even imagine what their struggle is in all this, watching their mom go from mom was this way yesterday and now she's this way today.
Exactly. And I was always very active. I was rarely sick. I was very active. So it was such an intense shift for them. My son, my little guy, he would climb up in the bed and lay beside me and just talk to me, Mom, you want to come do this? You want to come do that? And he didn't understand. We tried to explain to him, but at 4 years old, there's just so much he can understand. Yeah. All of my kids handled it in different ways. And I talk about this in the book that my daughter, she and I were very, very close. We did a lot of things together. And it was like I died. That's exactly what it was like. It was like I died because I couldn't be present with them. I could barely talk. And so she handled it in a very angry way. She was very angry because what she says is, I was a person and her person was just all of a sudden gone. And so she handled it with anger. She didn't understand why I couldn't just get out of the bed and come do the stuff with her I used to do. My middle son, he is more of a feeler. And so he was very emotional through the whole thing. Just, it affected him deeply on an emotional level. And so, they all handled it in different ways. And, it's interesting. In the book, I have a chapter called An Unexpected Gift that I talk about how I felt like I was scarring them for life. I was failing them. I lost an entire year with them. Yeah. And so I just thought I'm not preparing them for life. I'm ruining them. And I did not ask them for a long time their thoughts, their perspective on things, because I didn't really want to know, because I really felt like I have failed them. Like I didn't want to know that as a parent. And so recently I did ask them. I set them all down and I said, okay, I just really want to know your perspective. I want to know your side. Tell me how this has affected you. And Dave, I was shocked at their response. They were appreciative. They talked about how much more resourceful they are, how much more responsible they are, how much more compassionate and caring they are, and how they actually bonded together. Because I wasn't there, they had to bond together. They had to learn to do things together and figure out their own way. And so it was actually, as I said, an unexpected gift that they actually thanked me for that, because they have matured in a way that otherwise they wouldn't have been able to. So yeah. Although it was a challenge, in the end, 10 years later, they actually see it as a gift.
Wow. And then there's got to be days where you're unable to do anything and you're in bed alone and you go to places maybe mentally that you don't want to go to, but there's no one there to do what you did for others in that moment, right? And now you have to kind of find, in the depth of who you are, the tools that you would use to help people. You need to use them for yourself. Yes. Did you find that those tools worked for you in that moment, or did you find that you were kind of floating there and you didn't really know where to turn next?
That's such a great question, because as a person, and those of you who are listening who are in the helping field, you will know this to be true, that when you're helping others, it's a totally different concept than when you're helping yourself. It's two different playing fields. And so what I was doing in my job was helping others, but when it came to helping myself, it really took, I really, really had to work hard to transition my thinking into, okay, this is just like me helping someone else, which, the title of my book is Finding My Hero Within. I had to flip it around and be able to see myself as that kind of person. And so what ended up happening was what I had learned through my training and everything that I had been doing to help others was that, first of all, I had such negative thinking. I just wanted to be able to do something, anything that I could do before, because I literally could do none of it. And so I was so focused on, I just want to do something I could do before, and I couldn't. And so it's like I had this realization from all the training that, okay, if I'm going to get better, I'm not going to be able to do it with this negative mindset. It's not going to get me where I want to go. And so I knew that not only did I have to stop that, but that I had to replace it with something. Because if you just stop something, it leaves a gap there that's going to be filled in with something. And if you don't fill it in with something intentionally, it's going to fill in with something random. And so I knew that I not only had to stop that negative thinking, but I had to replace it with something. So I had my husband load up my iPod. I think that was that long ago when we had iPods. I know, right?
Right.
And so I had him load up podcasts and audiobooks and anything that would encourage me. And so I started listening to Dr. Wayne Dyer and Tony Robbins and Rumi and all of these luminaries. And that's when I was introduced to Rumi. And one of his poems that I came across at that time just really struck me, and it has become the driving force behind what I do with my Polish the Mirror business now. And the quote goes like this: "Ye who seek God apart, that which you seek thou art. If you wish to seek the beloved's face, polish the mirror and gaze into that space." And that told me that every answer I seek can be found within. That I have been looking outward for every answer I seek, but it's all inside of me. If I can just get in touch with my inner self, my authentic self, my soul, then I can find the answers that I've been looking for. I don't have to seek them on an outward way. I can find them within. And so then I set off on this journey of learning to polish the mirror of my life, to get in touch with my authentic self, to get in touch with my soul, so that I could learn to recognize those messages when they were coming and learn to become the person I needed to be able to share my story in the way that I've been able to share it. And so, yeah, my training came in very helpful at the time after I flipped that switch. But like I said, there are two different playing fields. You have to put yourself in the right field, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so when we talk about finding the hero within, every superhero that I've ever heard about has some sort of superpower that makes them stand out from all of the citizens that they serve. So Superman, strength, and Spider-Man, they have their own superpower. If we were to meet your hero who is inside of you, can you describe your hero and what is their superpower that you needed in this moment?
It would have to be learning how to connect within. And I ask people, because I do workshops, I do polishing the mirror workshops. And one of the things I ask people is, how many of you look into your eyes in a mirror? I'm not talking about putting eye makeup on or washing your face. I'm talking about looking into your eyes, and literally no one, they'll say, no, that's freaky. One person will always say, all right,
yeah,
no, that's freaky. I can't look into my eyes. And I say, it's because you've heard the saying, the eyes are the window to the soul. Mm-hmm. When we look into our eyes, we're seeing what's there. We have worked really hard. I know I have. I know you have. I know the people listening have. worked really hard to pack things down. We fold them nice, neatly. We put them in there so that they don't surface again. When we see into our eyes and into our soul, we see things that we don't want to surface again, that we've pushed down for a reason. And so, excuse me, being willing and able to not only see those things, but allow them to surface and to deal with them, allow them to serve their purpose so that they can move on, I feel like is a superpower, because it's hard. It's a simple thing, but it's a very difficult thing to do. It's something that you have to work through. But oh my goodness, Dave, once you get to that point and once you're able to do that, life it's such a different type of life. I cannot explain the difference life is when you get to that point and you can live from that kind of perspective.
So during all of this, what kind of, you talked about podcasting and a bunch of different things were there as a resource for you. Was there anything else that you drew on for strength in all of this?
My husband, he was a constant. Like, he was my caretaker. He didn't sign up for that role, but he became that role. And, in all of the things that I was dealing with, he would constantly point me back to, okay, but think about it this way. He would always give me a different perspective. And in one of the times that I was so deep and down, he said, why don't you try focusing on what you can do? Like, just flip it around, kind of like I did. Flip it around and focus on what you can do. What can you do right now? And literally at that time, the only thing I could do was put those earbuds in, turn it down really low so my brain could handle it, and listen to audiobooks and podcasts. And so I began to focus on that. I just thought, okay, this is something I can do. I'm going to be thankful for that, and I'm going to absorb everything I can. And so, yeah, he was always there. And I talk about this in the book too, just in the background, but always there, just helping me in whatever way I needed. And yeah, he was a definite resource for me.
And that kind of leads you to the power of podcasting and having your own show and putting this into the world so that you can help people. So, Amy, for somebody who's listening to this podcast, they're in a dark spot. They have those earbuds, these earphones on it right now, and they're feeling quite alone. They're feeling quite challenged, maybe down. And they're here because of the episode, because of your book, because they know you or they've heard about you. They're here for a reason. If I was able just to get out of the way for a few moments and turn the podcast over to you so that you could talk to them directly, one-on-one, what would you want to say to them in this moment? What do they need to hear?
I would say that you have a choice. You always have a choice. In that moment, I did not think I had a choice, but it was because I was only looking at it from one perspective. And when we get to that point where we're so deep down like that, we cannot see the other perspectives. We can only see the one that we see at the time. But I want you to know that there are other perspectives out there. There are other options. You always have a choice. And so I encourage you to try to figure out what your choices are, what your options are, because you can choose something else. You don't have to choose the only one way. There are other ways. There are other options that you can choose. You just have to be willing to open yourself up to seeing them from a different perspective. And that may be putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Like, I had to put myself in my husband's shoes and say, okay, this is the way he sees me. This is the way he sees this situation. Let me see if I can look at it from that perspective. And that will open up a whole new window, a whole new door for you to see things from a different light and in a different way. And it could lead you down a path that, like me, I ended up speaking on stage in front of 2,000 people, sharing my story in front of 2,000 people, simply from a conversation that just started with, I have to take a nap every day because I can only hold my head up for a few hours at a time. Mm-hmm. And so you just really never know where it can go when you open yourself up to the possibility that maybe there is a different choice. Maybe there is another option here.
Wow. Okay, so you get the idea to write the book. I'm sure you had a lot of people saying, Amy, you got to write this thing. You got to get this out there.
I did. I really did.
What was the journey of writing the book like? We have authors listening to the show who are looking for inspiration from someone who's done it. The book's coming out. I'm so excited for you. But for those that haven't even got to the point of releasing their book, but they're struggling through the journey of writing, they're looking to you for some inspiration. What would you like to say about your journey? Tell us about the process of writing the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say it was tough. Like I have heard when I would say, I'm writing a book, so excited. Literally everyone would say, oh my gosh, I heard it's so hard to write a book. Like, that was the first response. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, no, I don't want you to tell me that. It's not supposed to be hard. It's just fun, But because, and it depends on what you're writing about, honestly, but mine is such an extremely emotional, traumatic experience. It's literally 10 years of fighting my way through the medical system, through disability, through, trying to find my way, figure out what was wrong with me, to make a life worth living. So it was extremely difficult emotionally because I literally had to relive the moments to be able to put them on the page. And so I stopped and started writing too many times to count, literally, because I had to take a break from it. I had to step back from it and just breathe and kind of recenter myself and then come back to it. But here's what I want to tell you, those of you who are maybe working on a book or thinking about writing one, if you have a story like this that's very emotional, someone said this to me and it made a huge difference as I was writing. This is the reason I was able to finish the book. Someone said to me, why don't you try writing it from the person you are now instead of the person you were then? And that just blew my mind. I thought, and I said to her, but I can't do that. If I write it from the person I am now, I'm not going to get the emotion. I'm not going to get, all the things that happened in the moment. And she said, do you feel those? And I said, absolutely. And she said, just write it from the person you are now, not from the person you were then. And that made a huge difference. That's how I was able to finish the book, honestly. But I will say that it was something within me. Yes, as you said, so many people told me, you have to put this in a book. You have to get this out into the world. And so it's like I knew I needed to do it and I wanted to do it, but I didn't know where to start. Like, I'd never done this before. Heck, I was an English teacher. Like, I taught language arts in school. So I taught kids how to write essays, but I had never written a book. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I actually took a class, just like an 8-week course of, writing your book, and learned a lot in that, and just went from there to, I just started pecking out on the computer, and just something in me, it's like I knew that this had to be out. I knew that this had what I was feeling at the time was I knew that this message had to be out in the world. But what I didn't know along the way was the healing that was going to come through just getting it out. And so, yes, I do still feel like it needs to be out in the world, but I feel like the main reason I was supposed to write this book was the healing that I had while writing it, because it's such a personal, intense process. And I have talked to people who write fiction books, and it's the same with them. Like, you become that character. It's almost like acting, like you have to get into that role to be able to put on the page what that person is feeling, what they're saying, what they're experiencing. And so it's an intense thing, but it's very much worth it. Like, as soon as I, finished my manuscript, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I just celebrated. Like it's not that I couldn't believe I did it, but it was just like, I did it. Like it really happened, So I want you to feel that too. Those of you who are working on this, I want you to feel that feeling, because it is so worth it. If you push through and if you just keep going and get it done, oh my gosh, I'm just telling you, it's so worth it. Don't give up.
Yeah. And for the reader now as well, Amy, that's going to open the book for the first time, they're going to start on the first word and read through. Before they do that, the book is in their hands. They're ready to read. But to hear the voice of the author of the book that I'm holding, speaking to me about what I'm about to experience. What is your love letter to the reader? What do you want them to know?
Oh, I love that question. I want them to know that, and I say this in the book, that your hero is within you too, that you can find your hero within you too. This book is not only my journal, my chronicling my journey of my 10 years of fighting through this. It's also a guidebook to anyone who is experiencing adversity, because I include pages that are called Polishing the Mirror in Real Life, where I actually give you a behind the scenes. This is what polishing the mirror looks like. These are some things I do to polish the mirror of my life. And if you want to try it too, here are some steps you can take. And so there's a guidebook to it too. But in the end, one of my beta readers, I'm telling you, she finished it in one day. She said to me, I can't put it down. Like, I can't stop reading it. I have to know what happens next. And when she got to the end, she said, I have such a feeling of hope. And that's what I wanted. You as the reader, that's what I want you to feel when you finish reading this book, that there's a sense of hope for you too. It's not, and I say this in the book, I'm nothing special. Like, I'm just a gal living with a broken neck, trying to make a difference in the world. I still fail. I still make mistakes. It's not like I'm perfect, but I have been able to figure out how to look inside for the answers instead of outside. And it doesn't mean that I don't depend on other people. I have a whole community of people I depend on. It just means that when I'm able to deal with my issues myself, then I can be a better member of that community. I don't have to rely on them as much, and I can help them more. And so as a reader, I want you to feel that love from my heart, that the whole time I was writing, I was thinking about you. Like, you were in my mind, on my mind, the entire time I was writing, because I knew that I was writing because I have to use this story to help other people. And so know that I was thinking about you as I was writing it. And I hope you feel the love. I hope you feel the hope, and I hope that you want to polish the mirror of your life too. And I hope that you just love it as much as I have loved writing it for you.
Wow. Okay, so give us an update, Amy, on the family, where everybody is now and how they're doing, and then as well yourself. Give us an update on your health journey. I'd love to kind of get an update on that as well.
Yeah. I actually just had a second neck surgery. I talk about my first neck surgery in the book. But I just had my second neck surgery since I finished the book, to hopefully help the issue, help stabilize my neck more, to be able to hold it up longer. And so I'm just 6 weeks out from that. And so it takes about 3 months to really be able to tell the difference. So I'm not at that point yet, but I'm very hopeful. And so my daughter is 27 now, my son is 24, and my little guy's 14. And yeah, they're doing great. They, my 14-year-old lives with me still, obviously, but my other two are out, living life, enjoying life, and living on their own, and still call me. And, we get together all the time, and we have such, like I said earlier, such a bond that the whole, when you go through trauma with someone, it either drives you apart or it bonds you together. And it has really bonded us together in a way that, we just love being around each other and spending time together. So it's all going well.
Good. What do the kids think about their mom as an author? Come on.
It's
right?
So funny. I know. It's funny because, your kids are like, wait, what, Mom? One of my 14-year-old said, does that mean you're famous, Mom? And I said, it doesn't mean I'm famous. It just means that I have put my story into a book, And so I'm actually currently working on a TED Talk too that's going to involve my story. And so my older kids, they perked up when they heard that. They're like, wait, what? Mom? It's funny because your kids just see you as a regular person. They don't see you as anything. They see you as who you really are, And so it's funny that you asked that, because they're just like, wow, that's so cool. They really are my biggest cheerleaders. They are just so proud of me. And I love that. I love that about them. Oh,
it's amazing. I love this story. And what I love is how positive you are and how all the good you're putting out into the world through the book, the podcast, all the things you're doing. There's something about you, Amy, you just radiate it. It just shows up just when you smile and talk. It's just there. It's not fake. It's real. It's 100% real.
Yeah.
And when you said that you had your reader in mind when you wrote the book, like that's great, because as a reader, it's going to come across in the pages that you were thinking of them when you wrote. And I think that's something we shouldn't pass by for authors, is to have your readers in mind. It's one thing to have a story to tell, but you have to have someone to tell the story to. So make sure you're thinking about your readers when you write. I think that's a great point.
And my beta readers, when they're reading it, several of them have told me, like, I laughed a lot along the way too. I cried, but I laughed a lot too. And I said, I did that on purpose, because in thinking of the reader, having the reader in mind, this is heavy stuff that I'm talking about. Like, this is intense stuff. And I didn't want the reader to feel bogged down and negative about it. I wanted it, to give a light feel, because, the whole journey has helped me become the person I am now. And so I'm thankful for it. And so, that's just another way that I had them in mind as I'm trying to make light of things, in kind of a funny way too. So I love that you pointed that out. Thank you. I do feel like it's really important too.
Do you think your life would be noticeably different had none of this happened to you? That one night going down to get medicine in the middle of the night, none of this happened. Do you think you would have still been on the exact same path, helping people the way you are, or are you on a totally different journey than you were headed?
It's completely different, Dave. I can tell you that for sure. Not something I, talk about a lot, but my husband and I were really having marital issues at the time of the accident. And I can pretty much guarantee that would have not ended well. I had planned to go on. I have a master's degree, and I had planned to go on to get my doctorate, to work in school administration and, to do more things in the school system. And I just know that my life would have been so much different, because I was a workaholic. Like that's how I gained my worth, was by how much I could accomplish. And that was another reason that being completely incapacitated was horrible, was, like torture for me, because I wasn't able to accomplish anything. And that's where I got my worth from at that time. And so I would have been working nonstop, and I really didn't spend a lot of time with my kids back then, because I did work all the time. And that would have continued. The relationship I have with them now would not be what it is, because I was so unable to do anything. I was just there all the time. And so as I began to get better, I was able to spend more time with them to develop that relationship. And that would not have been there at all. So it would have been completely different. I really, it's kind of scary to think about, what it would have been like. But that's a really, really interesting question. Yeah.
Because I think that we lose sight of maybe kind of the path we were on and how life changes our path, and we don't really have control over that. But it's what we do with what happens in life, and how we rebound, how we move forward, how we find that depth of who we are as our character. But I can tell that prior to all this happening, you were about service to your community and service to others, and you've carried that forward. So that hasn't changed. You're just doing it in a new way.
That's exactly right. And I actually say that, I don't know if I said it in the book or in one of my workshops, but I say that I had been in service to others for so long, and then all of a sudden I couldn't do anything to help anyone. And so I ended up figuring out a way to help people just in a different way. And that's exactly what this is. So you're spot on. Exactly.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, I know, right?
I love it. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here in a second, Amy. But before we do that, I would love for you to share your website, your podcast, because, hey, we all need another great podcast to listen to, and yours is amazing. So we got to send people there. So where the book is, your website, all that information. And then I have one question to wrap up here at the end. But can you tell us where to connect with you?
Absolutely. I love to connect with people on my socials. I'm very active on there, and they are all listed on my website. All the links are on my website, and that is www.getamyshelp.com. And that you can also find the link there. Or if you want to order the book right now, it's in pre-launch. So if you want to be involved in the pre-launch, because I have some exciting things in store for pre-launch people, you can go there and sign up for the pre-launch. But once it's available, then you can go there and actually order the book from that site as well. My podcast is Polish the Mirror Podcast. It is on all of the streaming platforms. I actually do it live. I stream it live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, all the things. And then I take the audio and I upload it to the podcasting platform. So if you want to see it live, connect with me on the socials and you can watch it on there. And then you can go listen to it on the platforms as well. And I think that's it. All of my stuff is pretty much on my website. I do have a couple freebies on there if you'd like to check those out under the free tab. I have a 10 steps to showing yourself self-love. And then I have an emotion frequency chart that I created that I use with my story development clients. But in all honesty, I actually used it with this book too, if you want me to talk about that for a second.
Yeah. No, please. Yeah, go ahead.
If you're working on writing a book, this could be a really good resource for you. I found it came in very handy for me. I have taken 100 different emotions and I put them into 10 different stages based on their emotional frequency, their vibrational frequency. Everything has a vibrational frequency. And so, excuse me, emotions do too. So I have stage 1 are extremely low vibrational frequencies. Stage 10 are extremely high vibrational frequencies. And I've color coded them according to the rainbow because, side note, the colors of the rainbow are actually in order of their vibration frequency. Right? Isn't that wild?
Of course they are. Right. I love it.
So the chart is in rainbow order too. But this is what I did. When I started writing my book, I did my outline and I did like a block. Like I wrote just a little bit and I drew a block around that section. I went to the next one, drew a block around that section. And so then I went to this chart and like in chapter 2, I can't remember exactly which emotions that one was, but I went to whatever chapter 2 was. I figured out which emotions that chapter evoked. And I looked at my chart and I said, okay, the chapter 2 evokes the emotions from stage 7. So I'm a color person, so I just took a marker and I drew the color of stage 7 around that box. Chapter 3 evokes the emotions from stage 2. So I drew that color around that box. So essentially what I was doing was I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing lots of the lower level emotions all in a row. I wanted to mix in, I wanted it to be, it is a roller coaster. I mean, when you're reading it, because that's what it was that when I lived it, a roller coaster. And so you feel that when you're reading it, but I did it like that on purpose because I didn't want it to be all one-sided, if that makes sense. So this chart can actually be used as a tool when you're writing your book too. So you might want to check that out as well.
And you mentioned that the reader was saying that there was times of laughter and then there's deep parts to the book. So it sounds like your plan worked.
Yeah. My beta readers are telling me it did. So I'm excited about that. Yeah.
It's amazing. Okay. So my last question before we go, and you've been so gracious with your time, Amy, is the name of my show is Living the Next Chapter. So I have to ask for you, the book's not even out yet. We're waiting. We're excited it's coming. But how are you living your next chapter? What's next for you? What's next for your family? Would love to know what the next chapter holds for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I am working on this TED Talk, so that's what I have going on right now. My beta readers are asking me when the next book is coming out because the way this one is written, it encourages more information from the next book, right? And so it's already in the process, in the works, in the outlining stage, and a workbook along with it. So more polishing the mirror stuff to come for sure. That's what I have planned as far as I know right now.
It's amazing. Amy, thank you so much for making time to do this, for being on the podcast, for sharing your love for your community, your love for your readers in what you've written and how you show up in the world. just so grateful to have time with you. And I'm excited. I would love to have you come back in the future, as books come around, it happens.
Yeah.
Come back and share the next part of your journey with us as well.
Oh, I would love that. That would be so fun. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a delight. Thank you so much, Dave.
You are a great guest and a great podcaster all in one. You got the whole package. So thank you so much for doing this, Amy.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end of the podcast. That's a big signal to all of the players, the YouTubes, the Apples, the Spotifys, that you found value in this episode of Living the Next Chapter. Just by you listening to the end, you just sent a huge bat signal out to the app saying this was a great podcast, a great conversation. So you listening to this point, you've done your job. I have one more ask of you. If you know anyone that would benefit from this conversation, would you share this episode with them? Would you just send them a message, send them the episode, tell them about this episode, tell them to go livinginthenextchapter.com to get all the information about the podcast. Can you do that for me? Because the more people that hear this message, this episode, the better. I want to support these amazing authors, and I know you do as well. So sharing this episode really helps, and I appreciate you. See you on the next episode, and thank you for listening to Living the Next Chapter.